Good evening all and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Skillshare. This amazing platform offers a huge variety of online classes on literally anything you can think of, taught by the experts themselves. And with many of us now being stuck at home a hell of a lot more, it might be time to brush up on your existing skills or learn something entirely new. Be productive, make the most of your time like me. I've been learning Tai Chi from the Aquarius Academy, and I think I'm really starting to get somewhere now. If anyone else is interested, I highly recommend them. There are so many classes you can do, so go nuts and learn everything you possibly can. The first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium, so hurry up because this won't last longer than a few days. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I don't know what compelled me to finally share this, but I have been thinking about it a lot the past few days, and thought that it would fit quite well here. When I was about 8 years old, my parents were going through a divorce, and me and my older sister used to spend a lot of our time at our grandparents' house. It's a long ranch-style home on a corner of a very nice neighborhood. It's a 10-minute walk away from a gas station, grocery store, and a few fast food restaurants. The streets are long and lined with well-manicured houses, cradled by big, scenic California Valley hills all around. We were never very wealthy, but my grandparents bought it as a fixer-upper many years ago, and the property value had skyrocketed since then. As you can imagine, it's a very safe spot, and although there weren't many other kids in the neighborhood, it wasn't uncommon to see neighbors walking their dogs or pushing strollers down the sidewalk of our house. Although my mum was especially protective all our lives, this particular neighborhood was densely populated, and my family knew just about everyone who lived there. She grew up in that neighborhood herself, so she was understandably trusting. She would once in a while let me and my sister walk to the Rotten Robbie gas station on the other side of the block to grab a snack. I would always get a ring pop, and my sister would grab a Three Musketeer before we made our way back home. My sister was around 11 at the time, and this small amount of freedom was a really big deal to us. Nothing compared to walking down that street all by ourselves in the summertime, laughing and joking around, a few dollar bills in our pocket, and I felt like I owned the world. The one oddity I never noticed around the neighborhood was a small camper parked on the side of the road opposite to the gas station, right along the back side of the fence of another house. It sat there in the shade like a permanent fixture, all the windows constantly covered by opaque beige curtains. I can't explain why, but it always gave me this deep sense of foreboding when I'd pass it. I was almost positive someone was living inside it, because at times I'd hear the air conditioning running as it sat stagnant at the same spot. The hairs on my neck would always stand on end as I passed it, particularly as I passed the camper door, and I'd always keep an eye on it for the fear that one day it would swing open, just as I came to pass by. I think what bothered me the most was a drawing taped to the door from the inside. It was extremely messy, a sketch of odd lines in a brown-colored pencil that was frustratingly indiscernible. I could see the outline of something, a vague shape, but could never make out what it was intended to be. I never had the nerves to stop and stare long enough at it to really investigate, but each time I walked by I'd steal a glance. A year prior to the incident I'm about to describe, I was walking to my mum past the camper in the shade. We had just gone to the park nearby, and unfortunately had to pass the camper before we could cross the street and continue walking. I didn't want to seem afraid, so I kept on walking right behind her and didn't object when she walked past it. This time I felt a little more brave. I was frustrated not being able to decipher the drawing for so long, and while my mum was feet away, I stopped in front of the camper door and took a moment to really look at it. Upon closer inspection, the paper was filthy. I remember doing a project in elementary school where we soaked printer paper in black coffee to make it look aged, and that's what it reminded me of. My mum walked on without noticing I'd stopped following her, but my eyes stayed fixed on the indistinct mass of dirt-caked scribbles until I could make out what looked to be a tiny malformed face. My stomach turned. I immediately felt cold and disgusted as my eyes trailed over the rest of the image. I didn't know what kind of creature it was at the time, but now I can look back and say that the drawing was a badly deformed fetus inside a mass of large, perfect circles, like those made by a circular ring ruler. Its face was concentrated as if in pain. It was so graphically disturbing, and it seemed to portray this odd sense of suffering that stuck with me for days. As a child, I didn't know how to process it, and the mental image still makes me feel sick whenever I think about it. I'd never seen anything like it before. Adrenaline flooded my body and my chest hurt with fear, but I selfishly thought of my glorious little trip for ring pops and said absolutely nothing as I followed behind my mum. This was, in retrospect, a classically terrible idea. It's one of those things you scream at main characters in movies for doing. Ever since my ill feelings towards that camper had been elevated by the drawing on the door, I thought about it every time we drove by, and about a month later my mum once again graced us with several bucks and permission to walk down to Rotten Robbie and grab our respective snacks. I thought about telling my sister about what I'd seen on the way there, but she was older and braver, and I was terrified she'd make me cross the street with her to check it out. It was a bright sunny day, and I told myself with false certainty that nothing was going to happen if I didn't acknowledge it. Maybe it would go away. We walked past the camper, and it was thankfully uneventful. On the walk back, I was feeling more comfortable and was focused on fighting open my candy wrapper while my sister walked alongside me. We passed the camper a second time, but I didn't give it half as much thought as the first. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I recall being interrupted mid-sentence as my sister softly yet firmly said my name. There was a distinct fear in her voice that immediately set me on edge, like a bucket of ice water. All my senses heightened, and I became aware of everything, including the sound of haphazard footsteps about 10 feet behind us. It was accompanied by a heavily rustling sound like a heavy backpack, and nervously, I turned my head to look. A man with a long, unkempt beard, wearing many layers of ragged clothes, stood behind us, eyes unmistakably burning into the backs of us as he walked. His movements weren't normal. It was a drunken shuffle, like each of his feet were unimaginably heavy and needed to be moved one grand effort at a time. His shoulders were skewed, head tilted downwards with a strange arch of his neck. I could hear his shoes scraping the gravel with every step, but rather than seeming genuinely intoxicated, it was as if he was intentionally meandering in our direction like a zombie, with the direct effort to frighten us. Behind him, I saw the camper door was wide open for the first time in all the years that we'd spent living there, and realized this was its sole inhabitant. "He's following us," I choked out, tears filling my eyes. My mind was spinning as I stared straight ahead. The wide street and sidewalks, abnormally empty all again. My sister grabbed my hand. She squeezed it hard enough to hurt without looking my way. speaking carefully under her breath. "On the count of 3, we race home," she told me in a very serious tone. I couldn't reply through the growing lump in my throat, but every single cell in my body understood we had to put some distance between us and this man as quickly as possible. She began to count steadily while we walked faster, and the most terrifying part is that she started running before we even had a chance to. He must have heard her directions to me and tried to get a head start by sprinting in our direction before she got to 3. But his footsteps were noisy, and we bolted like deer the instant we heard him behind us. I'll never forget it. The chase felt exactly like how you imagine in your nightmares. The fear, your pursuer inches away from grabbing your arm or a fistful of your hair. I pictured myself being dragged into the van with nobody around to see nor hear me. We ran so fast we didn't even have to breathe to scream. And peering back behind me, about 10 seconds later, I saw him running in our direction with absolutely none of the impairment he showed with those zombie-like steps just moments before. I think back on it now, and he may have been deliberately pretending to be handicapped to lower our guard so we wouldn't start running. The thought is terrifying, but I can't rationalize it any other way. We made it to our grandparents' house, and without looking back behind us, yanked open the stubborn old door before slamming it closed, scrambling past their excited dogs to get as deep into the house as possible. I don't even think we locked it, as our main goal was getting within the line of sight of any adults as quickly as possible. My mum was talking to my grandpa at the table and gave us an amused look when we bounded into the living room. Since we were the kids, running around wasn't anything out of the ordinary, and she didn't ask what happened as we collapsed on the couch and tried to catch our breath. The inside of the house felt so safe and felt in such good spirits that I didn't even want to bring up what had just happened, like waking up from a nightmare you didn't want to talk about. I was desperate to go back to normalcy. I wanted to forget it entirely, to unwrap my candy and act like everything was completely normal for the sake of my own sanity. And that's exactly what I did. I asked my sister a few years back if she remembered this incident. I'm 25 and she's 28, and her response was strange. She remembered immediately without the need for me to prove details, but she quickly waved it off and insisted he had to have been a bored homeless man looking to spook some kids walking home, with no real intent to harm anyone. I don't know. I like to believe it's some innocent misunderstanding, but like they always say about gut feelings, they're rarely wrong. I feel in my soul he wanted to hurt my sister and I that day. I never told her or anyone else about the strange drawing on the door, and I'm not sure if my sister saw the open door and connected him to the camper or not. It's one of my biggest regrets, as I would hate for any other children to have been less fortunate after innocently walking past the camper in the shade. I believe he may have chosen the spot between the park and gas station deliberately, due to the number of children walking around the area. I never saw the camper again after that day. I'm not proud of how I handled this, and would encourage anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation to contact authorities immediately for the safety of others around. I don't know if this whole story comes off as melodramatic, but it was very real and very frightening, in a way I can't ever forget. This was back in 2014. I had moved off campus into a really nice part of town. I was in junior college, and this was my first time living on my own. Campus was only 2 miles away, and I would often walk back home from campus. I would take the bus or catch a ride with a friend to campus. I walked home because my schedule ending never quite matched up with the bus schedule, and my friend finished 2 hours before my daily schedule did. I was used to walking the 2 miles to my apartment. I never thought anything of it, because I walked right through the busy area of town, along the second main road, so there were always people around. My apartment was actually a stone's throw away from the most popular frozen custard shop in the area. Every night, the parking lot would be packed. I'm walking home as usual, get to the frozen custard shop and notice there's a lot of people tonight. It was just something I've always noticed and paid attention to. All of a sudden, a huge red truck pulls up behind me. I'm caught off guard because I have my headphones in, and it takes about 30 minutes to an hour to walk home, so I'm usually just listening to music or talking on the phone. I stop to take my headphones out to look at the truck. This man is dressed like a country singer and sitting in the driver's seat. He looks at me and asks me where the mall is, and I point him in the direction of it. He says, "I've been down that way. I'm a photographer, and I'm supposed to be doing a photo shoot at a bar behind the mall. I've lived in this town going on 3 years now, and I know where all the bars are located. It makes it easy when they're on the same street." I explained to him there are no bars by the mall. They're all on Philly Street, and he continued to insist there is a bar behind the mall. All of a sudden he just changes. He looks at me and asks me to step back, so I did. He looked me over and asked me how tall I was. I told him 5'7". He asked me, "I'm doing a photo shoot, would you like to be a model for it?" I told him I don't like getting my photos taken, and he insisted, telling me I was beautiful and I would look great. I told him my mum and brother are photographers and have tried to get me to model for them, and I don't like having my photo taken. Almost like he's given up on the tactic, he moves to another, then asks me where I live. I told him not far, but he wanted more info. I pointed in the vague vicinity of my apartment, making a point, not to an actual point at all. This dude then asks me if I want a ride. I told him, "No, it's not far, I'll be fine." He kept insisting I let him give me a ride home, and I kept telling him no, stepping further away from the truck. He then out of nowhere asked me how he would get to the mall, and I told him to take the road down. Go down the road, turn left, the mall will be on your left. He thanked me and began driving off, and I walked slowly to my apartment. I watched his truck get to the light, and instead of turning like I told him, he went straight. Going straight leads into a small residential area that you need to know this town well enough to get through. I lived in that town from 2012 to 2017, and still can't figure my way through there. I made sure the truck was completely out of sight before I hightailed it to my apartment and locked the door. My dog didn't quite understand what was going on. All he knew was he had to go potty bad. I tried to distract him for 5 or 10 minutes to make sure the coast was clear. My heart sunk when I finally did take him out. The same red truck was parked near the parking lot behind my apartment building. The truck didn't belong there. I'm one that memorizes all the vehicles that are normal for the area, and no one had a red truck like that one. I went back in and texted people describing the man and the truck to them in case something happened to me, and I did not go back out for hours. When I did, the truck was gone. Never saw the man nor the truck again. So to the guy who wanted to take me in front of the most popular venue in town on my way home, let's never meet. This happened about 3 years ago. I was 12 at the time, and I live in quite a large town. However, my house was relatively close to the center, and it was roughly a 5-minute walk. I had ordered a book at the local bookshop and was going to collect it. Despite being quite young, my parents were fine with me going by myself and quite often asked me to run some errands for them. However, this time it was just an in and out trip. My town is relatively quiet for its size and is mainly full of elderly people. Plus, the clothing I was wearing was not very suggestive. It was jeans and a shirt with long sleeves, and it was cropped slightly. I had a handbag and was wearing headphones, and was in no way looking to spark conversation. However, on my way back home, this scrappy-looking guy who looked like he was in his late teens/early 20s, approached me. Keep in mind, my social skills are awful. I get freaked out if someone offers me samples in town, so the fact this dude was starting to make conversation with me triggered something in my brain to avoid the conversation at all costs. I pretended I didn't see him and walked past, but he continued to follow me and ponder questions. I turned my music down to hear what he was saying, but still pretended to ignore him, and he ended up asking me if I wanted to see his van. I snapped and turned to him asking if he was stupid, then carried on walking. He kept following, so I built up my confidence to ask a couple having coffee to get rid of the guy for me. When he saw I was talking to people and they were pointing at him, he walked away. I thought that was the end of it, but I took a slightly longer route home just in case. As luck would have it, I walked down a long stretch of road and saw him at the very end, wandering around a small green. I suppose he saw me too, and he turned and started advancing towards me. I picked up the pace and sprinted to the gas station, run by this lovely dude who me and my older sister have had many run-ins with, and when I got there I told the guy everything that happened and he gave me the phone to try and call my dad. There was only a short way between the gas station and my house, but I was terrified going out. My dad answered the phone and I started telling him what happened, and that's when something broke out. I burst into tears, which slightly took me by surprise as I was not an easy crier. A little while later my dad came and collected me, and the shopkeeper told him what happened. We went home, my dad called the police, and we later found the guy wandering around said gas station. I hate to think what would have happened if anything had happened differently, and I hope to never see him again. One night in April of last year, I was home alone and craving some chips. Fortunately, there was a gas station near my mum's house, about a 5-minute walk away. I struggled with binge eating disorder, but I have it under control now, so my parents tried to keep junk food out of the house to prevent me from binging on it. So what I would do is wait for them to go to my brother's hockey practice or game and buy snacks from the gas station and hide the garbage in my room. As I was walking to this store, it was quite dark outside. It was roughly 8 p.m. and everything went normally. I found a bag of chips, paid for it, and started to make my way back. I live in a suburban neighborhood where the roads are generally not busy all of the time, especially at night. But to get to the gas station I had to walk down a busy main road, so cars were a common sight at any time. When I turned onto my mum's street, as it connects to the main road, I saw a dark van with tinted windows slowly follow behind me. 30 seconds later it pulled up, and a man rolled down the window. It was dark and I couldn't pick out any of the man's features, but the tone of his voice made him sound like he was in his 30s. He said something along the lines of, "Hey, my dog Chucky ran off and I'm looking for him. He's a golden retriever, have you seen him?" "No, sorry," I responded. "That's alright. Say, do you want to hop in and help me look for him? It'd be a big help." "I'm busy tonight," I lied. This was a very friendly neighborhood, and missing pets were a common occurrence, so I saw nothing wrong with what he was saying. The only reason why I said no was because I was honestly feeling lazy and just wanted to eat chips. To me, there was nothing off or wrong about the encounter. He thanked me anyway and drove off, and I got home a few seconds later, locked the door behind me, and enjoyed the chips in my room. A few days later, I was telling my friend in art class about what happened, just casually bringing it up. At the time, I still saw nothing wrong, until suddenly one of my friends who lives in my neighborhood, Kira, seemed to freeze up. "He drove a black van?" she asked. "Yes," I responded. I didn't know where she was going with that. "I saw him the other night. He told me the same thing about the dog, except when I said no, he opened the door and tried to grab me." That's when the realization sank in. What would have happened if I'd have agreed to help him? What would my parents do if I'd have never have come home? Kira was on a track team and I wasn't? What would have happened if he had tried to grab me or chase me? I was lucky he didn't. I felt sick and ended up having a bad rest of art class. To this day, I never go on walks when it's dark, out alone. I'll start this off by stating that at the time of this incident I was 10. This was about 30 years ago, and I've only explained the situation to my mum, but didn't tell her until years later. I'm ashamed of my actions because I knew better. I was in 4th grade. At this time my parents had very little money, but were trying their best to have a roof over our heads. Even though I was a kid, I understood the financial pressures they were having, which was why I didn't ask for anything. This particular morning as I was walking to school, I was approaching a car parked across the street from the school. This car was parked with the passenger side against the curb. The front passenger side door was open all the way, and as I walked by, I was curious and looked in the car. On the passenger side floor was a lot of quarters, probably around $10 to $20 worth. A man was sitting in the driver's seat with his arm in a cast. It reminded me of Ted Bundy. He saw me looking over and called to me. Here's where I knew better, but screwed up. I walked over and he asked me to help him pick up the quarters on the floor and put them in a cup he had. He said they fell out the cup and he couldn't pick them up himself because of his arm. I thought that if I'd help, he might give me some quarters for helping. Again, I'm a kid, and we're really poor, and I just wanted a few quarters so I could get a soda from the vending machine at school. I helped pick up the quarters and put them in the cup. I was kneeling on the sidewalk, halfway in and halfway out of the car. I remember looking behind me and seeing mothers walking their kids to school, and a few of them looked frightened for me but kept walking, bringing their kids closer to them as they passed by. I finished picking up the quarters and the man said, "My God, what a good helper you are. How about you hop in the car and I take you for some ice cream?" It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and he wanted to take me for ice cream? Yeah, that's unlikely. He began to reach over to grab my arm to pull me in, but at that moment a voice as clear as day told me to get up, get out of the car and go to school. I knew immediately what that voice was, who it was from, and you don't hesitate when you hear its voice. You just do what it says. Yes, for me and my belief, I can say with certainty that it was God. It wasn't the only time I'd heard that voice, but I knew it was him. I understand that others don't believe, and that's okay. I'm not telling the story for my beliefs, but it's the reason why I wasn't taken that morning. Once I heard his voice, I stood up and told the man I needed to go and ran to school. I could hear the man calling out, saying he'd give me some quarters if I go back to him, but it didn't work. I obeyed the voice and went to school. Not a word or look behind. I also never walked that way to and from school again. That was the short walk to school, but I didn't want to risk it, so took the long way home after. I did hear that the man in the car was a child predator. He had apparently taken kids, and a child in particular was found by the police soon after. Thank God the child was safe and the man arrested. I realized I actually dodged a bullet there, but I was ashamed of my actions. I was greedy and placed myself in danger even though I knew I could have been taken. And who knows what could have happened to me had I not heard the voice. When I was in elementary school, I ran away from home. I think I was upset because my parents were giving my brothers more attention than me, which wasn't that rare to be honest. I'm the middle child, and while all three of us have our issues, I was considered the least challenged as my older brother has autism and my younger brother has really bad dyslexia, and I was always expected to be a straight shooter. I remember packing my backpack and writing a note saying that I was leaving it on my parents' bed while they were gone, and I got about a block away when I saw my dad's truck heading towards the house. I was far enough down a side street that he didn't notice me, but a minute or two later I saw him speeding down the same street heading from the house. I walked a ways away. I think I stopped at a church to sit for a while before I began walking again. A few minutes later a van pulled up and a man rolled his window down. He said his dog was missing, but that he had the puppies with him and asked me to come help him look for her. I immediately saw the red flags that were drilled into me and started running in the opposite direction. My dad would sometimes do stranger danger drills with my brothers and I, and one of the situations was the two of us were in the car with him, and him telling my brothers and I that he had candy or something and asked them to come with me, and they screamed no and ran towards the house. I got to the gas station nearby and called my parents from there, and they came to collect me, and I remember seeing later on the news the picture of the man. I don't remember what his name was or what he was arrested for, but I remember how I felt when I saw his picture and my blood ran cold. I never ran away after that. I'm a 13-year-old boy, and I go to a sports club to practice badminton. One day after getting home from school, I got some rest and got ready to go to the practice. The route I take is quite long compared to the other routes my friends take, but I enjoy cycling, so I always take the long route both on my way there and upon my return. On the way there's a gas station and a supermarket right besides each other, so while on my way to practice, I thought I could stop and grab a drink or something to eat. I parked my bike by the bike stand, where there are plenty of other bikes parked. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark. Almost everyone has a bike here, and I head into the market. I grab my things, and when I'm done, I come back outside and see a guy who's quite tall, wearing all dark clothes. He was about 6'5" and was standing right beside my bike. He was so close he had to move before I could even get mine out. I quietly said, "Could you move please?" in Danish of course, and he answered with, "Oh, this is your bike. It's pretty nice." "Yeah, thanks, I'm kind of in a rush. Excuse me." The man stared at me for a while, but then moved aside. I unlocked my bike and got out of there quickly because, to be honest, I was a bit freaked out. But I've been given the talk about stranger danger many times by my parents, that it could really creep me out if there was something suspicious or something. I get to practice with my friends. I'm there for about 2.5 hours. We shower and then got ready to head home. It was around 9:30 when I was done, and this was late in December, so it got dark really quickly. At about 4 or 5 p.m. the sun would start to set. I went outside to grab my bike, and beside the bike stands there was a huge container, which was being used because they were renovating some of their things inside the club. And even though my bike was pretty far away from it, I could see someone standing and leaning up against the container staring right at me. While I was unlocking my bike, I tried to peer harder to see who it was. That's when I noticed. It was the same dude from the supermarket. He'd followed me to the club and waited for me to come out after finishing. That really creeped me out. At this point I was panicking. I felt the guy's intentions were not good, so I quickly unlocked my bike and began cycling fast. While cycling, I saw a beat-up, old grey car that was driving up so fast to reach me, and when it did, the windows rolled down, and it was the same creep, and he was shouting things like, "Oh, don't be scared, I want to talk to you," and stuff like that, which I really didn't want to hear as I was panicking. I decided to take a route where only walkers and cyclists can use, and rushed home in about 5 minutes. As I was entering my driveway, I couldn't see any cars drive past, and was very relieved. and happy that I thought I lost the guy. As I was locking the bike in the shed, I saw the exact same grey car driving up to my driveway. I was scared and paranoid that I ran for the front door and got inside and closed it. I went to our living room window where I could see who was walking up to our front door and saw the guy going up to the stairs to reach it. Seconds went by and he started trying to open the door, but as soon as he began banging on it, I called my mum, since there was no one else home at the time. Unfortunately, my mum picked up on the first ring and I began stuttering and telling her what happened. She told me to get a sharp utensil from the kitchen and hide in my room, and that she would call the police immediately. I went to the kitchen, did as she said, but before going to my room went to the front door, and there was a window on the left he couldn't reach, or else he would fall off the stairs, and I shouted that the police were on their way and that I was armed, even though I was stuttering through the whole thing. Minutes felt like hours, and I could see the blue sirens from the kitchen window. At that point I dropped the utensil and went out through the back door to quickly get the cops and told them what happened. While talking with them, my parents came home, hugged me tight, and I was crying. They searched our back garden and all over the house to see if anyone was hiding, but they couldn't locate the guy. What I think happened was that he got scared when I shouted out the window and left in a hurry, because there were visible skid marks on our driveway, which were of his car, and that's how he floored the gas to get the hell out of there. This was the first time something as scary as this has ever happened to me, and I hope no one has to go through what I did. I just hope I never meet that creep again. The trip by foot from my school to my home used to be 1 hour if I took the road, 15 minutes if I took the forest path. One day my two friends and I, who were 10 years old then, decided we'd take the forest shortcut. It had been raining recently, so there were only a few paths that weren't flooded. It looked more like a bog than a forest that day. Halfway through our walk home, we see this guy wearing a black hoodie. The hood is up, so we can't really see his face clearly. He's just standing there looking out at us with his hands in his pockets. We start walking faster, and every so often we look back and he's making his way around the flooded areas to follow us. Every time we look, he slows down and stops and simply stares. What's worse is that the paths available to go around the flooded areas were foreign to us, so we had no idea which direction we were going. After looking back twice and seeing the guy slowing down and staring at us, we just sprinted out of there until we got to the road. Luckily, the road we exited the forest from was a main road that we were familiar with, and safely made our way back home. When I was in maybe 3rd or 4th grade, a guy in a truck pulls up next to me as I'm walking home. I'm still relatively close to the school, so I'm surrounded by kids and parents. He says to me, "Your dad sent me to pick you up," which I know is bull, because my dad doesn't trust people outside the family no matter what, especially with his only daughter. So I ask him, "What's my dad's name?" And he goes quiet, and I can tell he's trying to figure out what to say, and I quickly say, "Oh, never mind, he's right there. You can say hi." Never seen someone speed off so quick. Thank God my dad taught me these things at a young age. I often go out on night walks, at least once a week. I live in Europe, so it being 3 a.m. here, I live in a city, and right as I opened the door leading onto the street, I saw a man walking on the street right beside the door. He looked me dead in the face and began going in the direction I usually go, but he kept looking back at me and slowing down, so I decided to take another route, walking fast. I was glad to see that there are many streetlights on, so I powered on, listening to music, until I looked behind me and saw that he had been following me. When I walked towards people at the tram station, he switched to the other street side, but kept on following. I kinda hoped he would just go into the tram station, but he didn't. With him still following me, I walked quickly to the other entry. They were just 2 minutes apart, and kind of hid behind a wall. I could see how he was looking around, trying to figure out where I went. When he saw me, he just kept standing and watching, leaning against something. I messaged a friend who had been sleeping and decided since it was only 5 minutes away from home I should just return. I crossed the street and he began following me once more. His phone was at his ear, but he wasn't talking. I turned around, started walking in his direction, and he said something like, "Hey sweetie, where are you going?" "Why are you following me? You shouldn't do that, that's really creepy." He ignored this and asked where I was going. "Do you want to come with me, sweetie?" "No, quit following me." He kept standing there looking at me as I walked away. I know the encounter wasn't exactly horrific, but he did follow me up to my door, and it really creeped me out. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. If you did, you know what you have to do, or what you can do. It's always optional. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons and members. Thank you so much to everyone who signs up. It means a lot, makes a big difference. And if you'd like to contribute a small amount financially to receive a few perks here and there, you can do that, but you can also not. It's entirely up to you. I just want to say, I don't know if I said it before, thank you so much for 250,000 subscribers. It really is quite a special thing for you guys to tune in nearly every night to new horror stories narrated by me. I'm really grateful to all of you. So thank you. And even though it's late to say, because Thanksgiving was a few days ago, I am grateful for each and every one of you, because you make it possible for me to tell stories, which is what I love doing. And I hope, we can keep doing this for many years. If there's a story that anyone would like to share, feel free to send it to me. The email address is in the description, or you can post it on my Reddit page. Either are fine. And if, you include enough detail and paragraphing and stuff, there's a very good chance it might find its way onto a video. So for now, it's time for me to sign off. Stay safe and awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.